Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Welcome, Chargers. Can you believe we're already coming to the end of January of 2020? I told you this year was going to fly. Well, the first month is already upon us. And I tell you, I'm excited about our guest today because two reasons. One, we're going to talk finances. And a lot of people just wrapped up the end of 2019 and they're looking at their finances and what happened that year. So we're going to get some insight from our guest on that. But also, today is a special day. Today is our 2-year anniversary of the Charge Podcast. And I can't thank you, the Chargers, the listeners, for joining us each and every week, sharing our podcast with others and letting them know about the podcast. And I can't believe it's been 2 years already when I started this podcast. It was kind of a thought. And man, we've had some wonderful guests. And this year in 2020, our goal is to do the same thing, bring you a great guest and bring you insight into your business and your life that can make a difference where you can put that positive culture that wins in your business and life. So let's get to our podcast today, but this is going to be an exciting one because we're going to talk about some of those finances. And we need to have that because as we look to 2020, what happened in 2019 that really you want to change in 2020 as you go forward? And I've got an expert in that field. It's Greg Tobias. He runs GT Business Advisory. It's a firm that helps small business owners ensure the financial success of their businesses and write themselves a bigger paychecks. Now, I like that statement. He applies this background. His background is a management consultant and data analytics expert to show his clients the roadmap to mastering their Monday. Greg, it is great to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Gary. Great to be here.
Well, it is great to have you here. There's lots of things we're going to discuss for our small business owner and entrepreneurs. But the thing is, don't click off if you're not a small business owner or an entrepreneur, because I want you to listen too, because I think there's going to be some tips even the individual can take, because I've done some research on Greg and the tips that he shares for small business owners, they will work in our personal life too. So listen up, and I know there's some great information that you can get there. Now, Greg, I ask all my guests, the first question I always ask them is my mantra. It's called Charge. Create habits around real goals every day. Well, it's the beginning of 2020, so a lot of people are trying to create some new habits. So I'm curious from your standpoint, what's a habit or habits that you have that you think has led to some success in your life?
Well, it comes down, I could think of a few things, but the thing that pops into my mind first is knowing when you do your best work and taking advantage of that. And for me, that's at the crack of dawn. I don't know about you, but I've got kids, and ever since I had kids, I just wake up like with the sun. I don't know why. It's just in my system. And that's kind of when my ideas come to me. That's when the energy's flowing. And so I basically just try to take advantage of it by getting up and, get right to it first thing in the morning, because I know come the afternoon, I'm not as effective, I'm not as inspired. So I just want to take advantage of that.
Well, that's a great one, because a lot of people talk about having a morning routine, getting up and getting some of that most important work that they have. And we've heard that from a lot of guests, and it really makes a difference. And I would challenge my Chargers that's listening. That's my listening audience. What I call them is their Chargers is, what are you doing? It's now getting the end of January. Are you still making the same efforts that you told yourself you were going to make at the beginning of this year? And that becomes the real key. Greg, I talked a little bit about your experience, that you're a management consultant and a data analytics expert, but can you tell us a little bit? You said you have some kids. Tell us a little bit about the family and who Greg Tobias is.
Well, sure. So I've got a couple of kids, both grown now, of college age. So I'm kind of over the hump, if you will, or at least I like to think so. In terms of my career, I basically spent 15 years at American Express and was a management consultant before that, really learning how to do data analytics. which is really boils down to looking at numbers that you derive from your business and figuring out what story they tell and explaining that story to your customers to help them make better business decisions. So the skill that I bring to what I do is really helping people understand the story that their numbers are telling them. So you look at your financial statements and you see a lot of kind of dry numbers, and you understand some of them, you don't understand others. There's a lot more that you can learn from them by digging into them and analyzing them. And that's my thing.
Well, that is great. And we're going to really dig into that. And I think it's a very practical time because we're right. We ended 2019. We're getting in 2020. Some people liked what their numbers say, but they probably don't really know what they tell them. And then there's other people that maybe are not very happy with it. And I'll never forget when I had my larger business and I would get my CFO would do my numbers. Of course, he never liked it when I just turned to the back page and I looked at the back number. I went back through the other numbers, but of course I wanted to see what that bottom line was. And some of our other business owners that's here may be doing the same thing. So let's kind of get into it. Let's ask that first question of, for business owners that's kind of feeling overwhelmed by their finances, where's a spot that they can start? Because now they're digging in. They should, and I tell all my business owners, you should know what your numbers tell you in 2019. Because that's going to help predict and help you really achieve what you want to achieve in 2020. So where should they start with those finances if they feel overwhelmed about them?
Well, I'll give you a two-part answer.
Okay.
The first is, if you're going to do it yourself, I would look at three key numbers: the net income number at the bottom line of your profit and loss, the balance of cash in your bank accounts, and your operating cash flow number, which is on your statement of cash flows. Those all really ought to look quite similar. And if they don't, then there's a problem somewhere. People often rely on the net income number to tell them whether or not they're making money, but you can make money and run out of money at the same time. You can have a profit and go broke. And so you have to understand how those three numbers work together. If that sounds a little overwhelming, then the second part of my answer is get help. No one goes into business for the purpose of managing their books and their finances. You go into business because you have a passion for something specific that you want to sell or do or create. So find someone who's passionate about doing that other stuff and let them partner with you and help you to figure out the financial piece, because it doesn't come naturally to anyone.
Yes. And for some people, numbers are just not their thing. I mean, They are great at either making widgets or creating content, those type of things, but numbers are not their thing. So they have to realize what are their strengths that they bring to the table. And for a lot of small business owners, they don't have someone in their corner for that finances, and they've really got to find that trusted source. And we're going to talk about some of that as we go through this session, but we're going to also tell you some of the things you need to really take a look at. And I think the next one really comes into, you really got me excited when I was looking at your website and did a little bit of research on you about your money mastery roadmap. And I really like for you to share with the listeners how they can get control of their finances and help steer them in that financial success they want, because I loved how you set up your money mastery roadmap. So can you walk us through that? I know there's a lot in there, but you tell me where we should start, and let's give them that example.
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to overwhelm. There are a lot of pieces, but basically the money mastery roadmap is a set of services that I provide to help people figure out how to get their businesses into a much more successful place financially. And it really has three perspectives in time: looking backward through the rearview mirror, if we're using an automotive sort of analogy, figuring out where you are right now, like looking at your GPS and figuring out where am I now in the middle of this journey, and then looking forward toward your destination, where are we going in the future. And each of those views has some specific elements to them that can help you. So if we're looking backward, you want to look at those three key numbers I described. That's part of what I call my 3-point inspection. And that's just kind of fundamentally, are we making money or not? And if not, what do we need to dig into to learn why not? There's tracking your performance over time. So figuring out what specific numbers are the meaningful and relevant ones for your business and tracking them regularly. And also looking at your spending, making sure you're making the right decisions about spending and figuring out if there's opportunities to save on cost. In terms of looking at the present, where you are right now, that's really about your goals and what you want to achieve. It's also about whether you're compensating yourself appropriately. You know, you want to make sure the business is working for you and not the other way around. And how much is your business worth today or in the future? If when this time comes when you might want to cash out, What might it be worth to someone buying it? And then looking forward, where are you going? That's about creating a budget, a strategic plan for spending your money. It's about forecasting your cash flow so you know when the dollars are going in and out of your accounts and you're not making sure you're not going to go broke. And finally, packaging all of this into your business plan, which should be an ongoing, dynamic, living document that sets the 3 to 5 year vision for your business.
Great. That's a great overview. And I love the setup because it's really getting people to look at the rear view, which right now we're talking about. Let's look back to 2019 let's really take that 3-point inspection of your business and looking at what was your performance? What was your bottom line that's there and some of those expenses that's there? What's some of the things, Greg, when you're working with organizations in the rear view mirror, what do you see or what really comes out a lot of times in that analysis?
Well, a very, a very common gap is you will see healthy net income numbers, profit numbers on an income statement, but there's a cash flow problem. And if you're selling and buying, very typically there's an issue between how quickly you're getting paid by your customers versus how quickly you're paying your suppliers. So you always want to be monitoring that by looking at your accounts receivable and your accounts payable, and there's some specific metrics you can use that make them comparable, where you basically figure out how many days worth of sales are outstanding, waiting to be paid for by your customers, and how many days worth of expenses, cost of goods sold, are you waiting to pay. You always want to make sure you're paying slightly slower than you're receiving so that the cash flow is always positive. So that's a very common example, particularly for small businesses and also for growing businesses. When you're in a growth phase, you can lose track of those expenses really quickly. You can get yourself in some trouble.
Well, and I think it's crucial because like we said, we just ended 2019. And for a lot of people, fourth quarter and December is specifically, if you're in a retail type business, may be your biggest month of your whole year. Yep. And you've bought a whole bunch of inventory getting prepared for that. And then if you're allowing people where they're putting that on accounts receivable, as you said, you're delivering those products. I've talked to business owners before, and sometimes they don't take a hard enough look at that receivable line. Where is it at? And right now would be a great time at the end of January. Where are you at of people that still owe you in the month of December to make sure you're getting that cash flow back into your business and being able to put it to work? Otherwise, the challenge becomes, of course, for some of us, the business, and my business, it was that way. I used to be in a wireless retail business. We did a ton of business in December. But man, January was a lot slower. So I needed that cash flow to be able to really move my business forward. So I really want people to think about in that rear view, where have I been? Let's take a look at that. And of course, we're going to share Greg's information. If you want some help in that, that's what he does. So he's in here giving us great advice. But if you need some help in that, he'll be glad to help you with that, because one of the things you offer is kind of a 3-point inspection, is really taking a hard look at that. But as business owners, you've got to be able to do it. And again, if you're not a business owner, what can you get out of this? You can do a 3-point inspection also. You may not have receivables, but you know what you spent in December. So now you maybe need to look at some of those expenses and how can I change that? Because a household budget runs on the same philosophies of a business does. And that's one thing I used to do with my team. I would try to talk to them about household budgets is like running a business, because you have so much income coming in. And if you got too much expense going out, you're going to have the same problem, cash flow crunch. And what is it called? A credit card. And there's enough credit card debt in the world. You don't have to be one of them that helps in that area that's there. Let's go to the next one, because I think this is a good one with us still being in January to really get business owners to keep their eye on, because you talk about their current location of where they are now. And I think your 3 points was goal setting, owner's comp, and business valuation. Share with us what you really mean that we need to have in those areas.
Well, I think when you think about your business goals, that you should always be revisiting them and refreshing them. And the way to think about setting goals that I like, there's a rubric of creating what they call OKRs, which is objectives and key results. And basically an objective is what you want to do, and the key result is how you're going to do it, and specifically how you're going to measure it. So you want to set goals that you'll be able to measure numerically whether you've succeeded or failed. So something very simple could be, I want to grow my revenue by X amount of money. Well, it's pretty obvious how you measure that, right? You want to keep things very concrete, very specific, and very measurable so that you can look back in time and there's no ambiguity. You either did it or you didn't. So that's how I think about goal setting. Owner's comp, I see a lot of small business owners not getting into the habit of paying themselves. And I think there's there's a lot of people kind of have heard, oh, well, you're not supposed to take money out of your business at first because you're trying to grow. And I think that's really nonsense. I think I want to recommend a book here real quick. It's called Profit First. It's a great philosophy of how to make sure that your business is working for you. If you do nothing but read that book, you're going to revolutionize how you think about money in your business. Because it's basically saying, listen, make sure you're taken care of first. Your business exists to help you and your life. You don't exist to help your business, And so it's a great way of thinking about, basically you take your profit out and you save for your taxes, and what's left is what you've got left to run your business on. And that enforces a certain real discipline around what you really need to spend money on in your business.
I appreciate you sharing that. We had Mike, sorry to jump in there, but we had Mike McCallowitz on in 2019.
There we go.
And we have a podcast. I can't remember the number right now, but in show notes, I'll put that. So if you want to reference back to that podcast, it's there.
Yeah.
And he shared kind of that philosophy that's there. And Mike did a great job sharing what he talks about in the book. So I will reference that. And I agree with you. Actually, last year, we ran our business on the profit first philosophy. And it made a difference in our bottom line. So it just, I believe
exciting,
it too.
Right?
It is exciting. So thanks for sharing that. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Business valuation, I think you were going to get into.
Well, and then finally, it's always helpful to understand what your business would fetch today if you felt you wanted to sell it, and what it might fetch in the future if you pull certain levers or achieve certain numbers. It's another way of thinking about where you're going, really. But, at the end of the day, if you're an entrepreneur and you've set up a business, presumably you don't want to work yourself into the grave with it. At some point, you'd like to sell it and retire and build something of value that you can live off of. And so that's another good area to keep an eye on a regular basis.
Great. Well, I was looking at your website, and one thing I want to share with people is you have some great blogs on there.
Thank you.
And I just happened to look at your last blog that I saw 2019. You had one on November 8th or 9th in that area. And the title is Your Business Veering Off Course? Continuing the Journey to Make Money Mastery by Tracking Performance. And you talked about this earlier. Let's dig just a little bit in that. I don't want to get too deep because, like you said, sometimes numbers may scare them. But when you're talking about those key performance indicators, they're called KPIs. I talk to my business owners about this also. Share with us, because I liked how the analogy used with the KPIs, with the miles per gallon. And can you kind of share that philosophy? And that may bring to light why that they can look at some of their KPIs.
Sure. Yeah, I like to use this automotive analogy just because I think it makes it very accessible. A KPI is an acronym, and acronyms make people kind of go blank. But basically, they're just numbers that you're measuring so you know how your business is performing. So the example I gave was miles per gallon. And any car owner is aware that they get, something like 25 or 30 or 35 miles per gallon with their car. And that's a measure of how efficiently their car uses fuel, right? So you figure out, if you want to calculate it at any point in time, you figure out how much distance you drove, you figure out how much gas you used, you divide one number by the other, and you've got miles per gallon. Well, most KPIs are pretty much as simple as that. Like the most complex is usually just one number divided by another. The trick and the art is in figuring out which KPIs are relevant to your business. So we were talking a minute ago, you gave an example of people in retail. Inventory is going to be very important in retail. Not so important in a services business. If you're a lawyer, you've got no inventory. Yep. So that's a simplistic example, but there's a few key metrics that are relevant to every business, and I mentioned them at the top. Net income and operating cash flow and things like that. And there's others that you can research this on the web. There's lots to choose from. Some will be relevant and some will not. And so that's really the art to this, is figuring out what dashboard you should put together to measure for your business that's going to be meaningful to help you make better decisions.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important for us to understand those metrics are so crucial and stuff. And Greg will share at the end his website. So if you want to go back and look at that blog. We will reference it even in the show notes there that people can go back and take a look at that from your website. So thanks for sharing that. Now,
Sure.
let's go to the last one, because the exciting part is, and we're at the beginning, of a new year, actually a new decade. It's 2020. That's a new decade, Greg. So we can
That's
really
right.
make some real impact in our businesses, because it's not just about 2020. What do we want to do? Maybe you have that goal of by 2020, 2030 of selling your business or retiring. So really it's, where am I going? And let's talk about that destination when you talk about with your money mastery in each one of those, because you talk about spending plan, cash flow forecasting, and business plan development. Why is
Sure.
those so crucial?
So spending plan is so I can avoid the dirty word budget, which just seems to turn people off, but it's essentially a budget. You need to know roughly how much money you're going to have to spend and where you should be spending it. And, there's a phrase that's used by a lot of the budgeting gurus for personal finances that applies to business, which is give every dollar a job. Don't just treat it like a big honeypot to dip into whenever you like. Figure out in advance, I've got this much money to spend. Here's where it's going to make the most impact for my business to spend it. And that's really what budgeting is. It's making sort of strategic decisions how to allocate your resources. Cash flow forecasting is much more granular in that you can set a budget, but if you don't time it all right, you might not have the money available to spend the money you planned to spend. Cash flow forecasting is saying literally, and I do this in my personal finances, I actually forecast my checking account a year in advance. And I don't have it down to the penny, but I know the big line items. I know how much income roughly is going to come in, and I've got budget line items set for the big expenditures. So I kind of have a sense many months out what my bank account should look like. And if I'm veering off track, I know it. It's a very similar process for your business. It's probably a little more complex because there's more moving parts. But you're basically just trying to, figure out the timing of when you're going to spend money and when money's going to be coming in, and making sure that you stay in the black. And then finally, I put business planning in this future-oriented space because if you have a business plan, it should always be evolving with the way your business is evolving. If you don't, you probably should have one, because the exercise of creating one and managing to one really helps you set a direction. It sets your mindset about your business in a way, and it's worth revisiting that on a very regular basis.
I just love that. Is a great concept, and reason I wanted to break down each one of those areas. I mean, you explained it great, but now you've got the true roadmap there, and it's no different than the person with the personal budget. As you said, you got to have a personal budget. People that do not have a household budget normally spend more than they make. And what do they find out? They now have credit cards with a high debt limit in it because they're not reducing that spending. So that is, folks, if you're not a small business owner and you thought this podcast doesn't apply to me, you got the lesson. And there's plenty of tools out there. Then there's been mega gurus. It's got lots of books, lots of tools that's out there for personal that you can do. But in a business, I'll be honest, we've not seen many of them. You've talked about a book, but now the capability of someone that could help you, advise you along that path. I do business coaching, but I don't get into the financial side. I get into the strategic side. How do we generate more business? How do we get to the objectives and goal setting that they want? And I really love the concept that you have here about having that money mastery roadmap of what you want to do in your business. So business owners, I hope you're listening to this. We're going to give Greg's information. If it's stirred your interest and you don't have someone on that team, I'm going to have him share his information to be able to share that with him. But I've got a couple more questions before we go there, Greg. And one of them is what are some of the common mistakes? I know they probably fall right into that mastery, but the common mistakes you see business owners make when it comes to their finances.
Well, first and foremost, not dealing with it. The worst that you can do is sort of bury your head in the sand and kind of not track things and not have your business financials in good shape, because you're going to have to fix them at some point, if only to get your taxes right. And it's very time consuming and expensive to have someone clean up the past rather than to managing things as you're going along. Secondly, for most people, it's a mistake to try to do it yourself. And that isn't necessarily because you're incapable, but you don't have the time. It's not the right use of your time if you're a business owner. There are higher value things for you to do than to track the finances. Another biggie, and I've got a blog post about this one, is mixing your business and personal finances. Using a business credit card to buy
drives
something
me
personal.
crazy.
And it's just, I get it, because everybody knows that, as a small business owner, in the eyes of the IRS, it's all your money. It's left pocket, right pocket. But it's so important for legal reasons, for strategic reasons, to keep those things separate. And it's a confusion that I see that makes it very hard to know how the business is doing, because, oh, look, there's the home cable bill, and what's that doing in here? It's just, you've got to clear all the stuff that isn't business related out of there. And then finally, I would say, lowballing on price when it comes to the people that you help, that help you. You can find a $20 an hour bookkeeper, and you're going to get a data entry clerk. And at the end of the day, you're not going to know what to do with the information, and neither will they. So, if you want to take your finances seriously, you got to be serious about how you're going to invest in that.
Yeah. And then really, if you want to take it to that next level, you've got to get experts in your field. I tell people, when they're hiring me, they're not hiring just a business coach that costs X amount of dollars per month. What you're doing is, my goal is, I should increase your income if you're willing to take on and do the work that needs to be done. Because normally what happens, let's be honest, some businesses owners are sitting there right now and they're kind of having a pity party for themselves because it's a new year. And guess what you realize in January? I've got to go do it again. It doesn't just happen, no matter how much recurring stuff you got set up, you still got to make effort, and you got to put the work in to be able to get the return. So just like you felt in December, you was excited about however you ended your year, go ahead and put that excitement back in your business right now to be able to do it. Greg, we're coming up on that time, but I got one more question for you, and I think you answered part of it maybe in the last one, but I want you to share it because I know you're an advisor, and for some people, they may have a CPA that does their end of the year books, and maybe they're getting ready right now to take those to them because it's the end of January to take those books to them, but all they do is they report back numbers to them. So what's the difference between that and, I don't care if you're a CPA, the accountant you have is a CPA, let's hope they are on that side of it. What's the difference of having truly an advisor in your corner that's going to make the difference?
Well, basically there are two big reasons to track your business financials, and everyone understands the first one, which is taxes. And that's where CPAs or enrolled agents come in. It's terribly important. But CPAs are basically in that business. Most of the time, they're in the tax preparation business, the tax strategy business, the tax planning business. What they are not in the business of doing is sitting down with their clients on a monthly basis and going over their financial results and making recommendations on how to improve operational performance. They don't function like a small business CFO. They're there for a very specific purpose. And what I do as an advisor is much more in-depth. It's much more frequent. It's much more dynamic. And it covers a lot more areas of what you need to cover in order to succeed in business. And so that's how I draw the distinction.
Excellent. I appreciate you sharing that because I think people need to know. And why don't you go ahead now and give your website address if you would. We're going to have it all in show notes so you can say it. If they want to reference back to it, they know they can go to chargepodcast.com and get show notes. And then I think you also had something that you're willing that if they would like your 3-point inspection, there's a way they can access that too from your website.
Sure.
Share that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So the website address is gtbusinessadvisory.com. Those are my initials, Greg Tobias, businessadvisory.com. It's very easy for me to remember, at least. And yeah, I've got an offer for your audience. If you reach out to me after having a look at my website and shoot me a note or set up time with me and mention that you heard this podcast, I'm offering a discount on the first element of the Money Mastery Roadmap, which is that 3-point inspection for $75, which is over a 20% discount. So happy to have you folks come on board and kick the tires a little bit and try out what my services for a relatively small price point.
And I would tell you, go take a look at it because I looked at it getting ready for the podcast. Some great information he has on there, some great blogs. You can get to his blogs there. We'll have those referenced in there and then kind of take a look at that Money Mastery Roadmap. Is it an area in your business that you need to get better at this year? Well, go ahead and take up Greg on his offer, and he's going to give you a discount on it and do the 3-point inspection. That's all there is. Take a look at your business. It's like looking underneath the car of your hood of your car and seeing, does it need oil? So take a look at that because this is a great time to do it because you got 11 months to still affect it. And we're only at the end of January. And then you've got almost 9 years and 11 months to affect it over this next decade. I've been into this decade thing because I don't think we realize when we get a new decade, it's almost like we can start over in some of the areas that we want to in our life and for sure in our business. So I've been really sharing that with people, Greg. Now, I've got my recharge round, and I want to ask you the same question that I asked the others here. But it's kind of my framework of what I speak on. And I love hearing from business owners, entrepreneurs, advisors, all type of different people, hearing how they feel on those. So let me ask you, Greg, share with me how you believe your mindset affects you each day.
Oh, I mean, it's critical. And like a lot of people, I have my up days, my down days, you know. If my mindset is in a down kind of place, my ideas dry up, my energy is sapped, I don't have inspirations, and I'm not leaping out of my chair to go do stuff. You know, it's critical. And to be honest, sometimes you have to recognize when to just give yourself a break and let yourself have a recharge kind of day. You're not always going to be at your best, and it's important to know when you're at your best.
I think that's excellent. How about in this one, because you talked about you like in the morning getting right after it because you're kind of that morning person that dig into your hard projects you have at the crack of dawn, be able to get going on it and stuff. What do you do in those times where you've got to bring that energy up a little bit? You talked about sometimes you struggle a little more in the afternoon. What allows you to kind of create that energy that you want to have each day in your life?
Well, it's about timing. You know, I've reached an age where I know I've got my good hours and my less effective hours, and so, you know, I try to use my most impactful hours on the most important stuff, the highest value stuff, right? And I can probably tick along at 75% if I'm doing more routine things in the afternoon. So that's one thing. And also I like I said, I wait, I get up in the morning and I'm looking for those ideas that just have me leaping out of my chair. And if it comes to me, I leap out of my chair and I execute on it as quickly as I can, because that inspiration comes and goes pretty quickly, as we know.
Excellent. Yes, I know how that happens. How about the number one connection or maybe relationship that's made the biggest impact on your life?
Well, you know, I've had a lot of different people in my life, a lot of different connections. But if I'm really honest, at the end of the day, the connection that it has the biggest impact is the connection I have with myself. You know, I think we all have this challenge in life to figure ourselves out, work out a positive relationship with ourselves, inspire ourselves, spur ourselves on, be our own, you know, biggest fans and champions. And if you get all that right, then you can be much more effective and positive in the other connections in your life.
So true. So true. Because if we know thyself, we're able to give ourselves a little bit easier. What advice has influenced you the most in your life, Greg?
When I was really young, I was interested in acting, and I had this real crisis of confidence because I didn't really have much experience, and I knew I kind of wanted to do it, but I felt kind of like a fraud telling people about it. And a friend of mine said, "Listen, just tell people you're an actor. If you say it enough times, eventually you're going to believe it yourself." You know, and it's kind of like a fake it till you make it sort of philosophy.
Yep.
But, you know, convincing yourself can sometimes be the biggest hurdle.
Excellent. Now, I know you recommended one book. You don't have to recommend that one. You can have a different one here. Recommend a book and share why you love it.
Well, my answer might surprise you a little bit. I've been an avid reader all my life, and I've read all kinds of different material in different genres and points in time and what have you. But in my life, I have found myself returning over and over again to one work of art that may sound a little frivolous, but it's The Lord of the Rings. I'm a Tolkien fan. And I've read those novels all from cover to cover 5 or 6 times in my life. And now, more recently, the movies, the full director's cut, at least 3 or 4 times. And every time I revisit that material, it brings something new to me. There's something that resonates for me at that point in my life. And I think that's what a great work of art does. It resonates in multiple ways for people.
That is awesome. I would have never guessed that. See, but that's how we learn from others, and we see and we learn all the time. My last question for it, you almost made it through the recharge round, is in one sentence, what legacy do you want to leave the world?
I'll give you one word. It's love. I actually, my philosophy is that's really all we have on this planet at the end of the day. And so I want to leave my mark on the hearts of my sons and my family and my friends, and leave behind love.
Well, You've definitely given us love today by sharing your expertise with us, because the Money Mastery Roadmap, I just think, is wonderful. And I hope our business owners and even individuals understand that they can do the same thing, the understanding where have they been, where am I now, and where am I going in your finances? Because that's how you're going to get to your destination, is you got to have that. I have a quote that I say about goals. It's like having your headlights on. And that's what this is. It's like having your headlights on because you know where you want to go in the area of your finances. And it is critical in businesses because you may have had a great year, but really dig into why that is there each and every time. Greg, if you don't mind, share that website address with us one more time, and we're going to have it in show notes too.
Awesome. Yeah, that's gtbusinessadvisory.com.
And remember, that's where you can get. He has his 3-point inspection. All you have to do is mention that you was on the Charge podcast, and you're going to get a discount on that if you're interested in that. He also has on there some great blogs, and I've recommended those already. But please go to that. Check out his website. If you've got some questions, reach out to Greg and connect with him, and I know you're going to be pleased with it. Greg, again, we can't thank you enough for being on the Charge podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Gary. It was a pleasure.
Chargers, I hope you get excited about what you heard. That was not some boring financial information. That was secrets to how you can grow your business to the level that you want. It's the secrets that you can grow your personal income to where you want it and how to save that money that's there. So it's about having a roadmap. And Greg has the roadmap of the Money Mastery Roadmap. I want you to have your roadmap of where you want to get by the end of 2020. And then we all think it'll be a long time before the next decade. And before you know it, it'll be 2029. So what is your roadmap? Put that in place and put that in play right now. And then again, I've got to thank you. It's been 2 years that we've been doing the Charge podcast. And because of you, we keep reaching more and more people. But I need help in that. If you like this podcast and you know a business owner, number one, send it to them. And then number two, go to wherever you listen to the podcast and rate and review our podcast. That's how we get more listeners. We have over 50 countries, and we've almost reached all 50 states in the United States. I've got a couple more there. We're going to list those in. And if you know someone from one of those states, they'll be in the Charge podcast notes. Please reach out to those people, because I would love to come back on this podcast and say we've reached over 50 countries as well as all 50 states in the United States. So Chargers, again, thank you for joining us today. I want you to go out and create the day that you want and make it a great day. We'll see you back here next week. Thanks for joining us.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.